On today's show, we continue our prospect pool rankings countdown to number 1. We'll look at teams 11 through 9 on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalikesh, QMJHL and Crossover Scouts for Elite Prospects with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scouts for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down teams 11 through 9 in our prospect pool rankings as we continue the countdown to the best prospect pool in the NHL. We'll start off at number 11 here with the Seattle Kraken. In the first segment, we'll look at the Calgary Flames at number 10 in the second segment, and we'll look at the Philadelphia Flyers at number 9 in the third segment. But before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you think of the episode and what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. Let's get started right away here with the Seattle Kraken at number 11, and we'll start off with the recently added Berkly Catton, a dynamic, skillful winger, brings a lot of pace, a lot of skill to the game. Talk me through his game overall, his past season, how interesting it was, and what makes him our top prospect with the Seattle Kraken here.
Yeah, I mean, he was the highest scoring draft eligible in the entire CHL last season, scoring 54 goals and 116 points in 68 games with the Spokane Chiefs there in the WHL. And he was playing upwards of 25, maybe even 30 minutes a night for a good portion of that. So his per 60 production isn't quite as eye-popping as that. But the level of skill, as you mentioned, that he brings to the equation, the creativity, and overall just like the raw ability to create off the rush is one of the best out of any prospect pools, like top guys throughout the NHL here. He's a fantastic rush creator, and he's able to do that by blending really quite seamlessly his high-end skating ability, high-end puck handling, even elite-level puck handling ability. And he's also a great playmaker and goal scorer. He's so adaptable and versatile with the puck on his stick. Defenses really struggle to defend him apart from trying to overwhelm him physically. That's one area that will definitely need to improve a little bit before he makes the leap to the NHL. I mean, 5'11", 170 pounds, but beyond that, also a lack of leverage mechanics to really be much of a threat in board battles or puck battles. Like in the offensive zone, and his defensive implications also hit or miss. So definitely still some areas in his game where he can improve, but the fact that he was able to so consistently create high-end offensive chances without much of a supporting cast in Spokane last season is a real compliment to just how talented he is offensively. And I think that you give him 2 years to develop and you have a top 6 level skill guy here. And it's something that Seattle certainly lacked in their prospect pool as a whole. They have guys like Matty Beniers and Shane Wright that are really capable two-way centers. And while Catton can also play down the middle, I think that especially with that 1-2 punch, with also defensively capable centermen, he'll be playing very comfortably on their wing at the NHL level. And I think that he could very much be the go-to offensive driver, potentially on a top line for Seattle. So a lot to be excited for. And he's not the only one either. The next two players I wanted to talk about for Seattle are also very creative offensive pieces. And let's start off first with the bigger of the two players, and Carson Rehkopf, whose progression since being drafted and really just his ability to take on the reins in Kitchener, scoring 52 goals and 95 points to D+1 in 60 games last year, was just fantastic. But what elements of his game are in your eyes, what are going to elevate him into potentially becoming a top 6 level scorer in the NHL?
Well, I mean, the shot's already there for me. The mechanics are ridiculous. His ability to rifle it on reception, catch and release, one-timers, curl and drags. He's got it all in terms of goal-scoring tools. But it's really just the confidence with which he carries himself and the creativity that he brings to the game. He's not a pure shooter. He's able to make plays through lanes. He's able to pass cross ice to teammates, and his timing, his awareness when it comes to those passes is great as well. But it's mainly about confidence. He tries plays that others just don't really think of trying. So overall, I think it's really the confidence aspect of it that benefits his shooting, benefits his passing, benefits his stick handling as well. He's a really smart thinker of the game as well. He's got some physical tools. At 6'3", 200 pounds, he can wear off defenders. He can protect the puck. He's got some decent tools on that side as well. So overall, creative, confident, capable offensively across the board, whether he's shooting, passing, or handling. There's a lot to love with Carson Rehkopf here. I think he's a great prospect and should continue to develop properly. But also a bit smaller than him, we have Jagger Firkus, who's 5'10", 153 pounds. Am I reading that right? 153 pounds?
He's small. He's small, boy.
But he's very, very skillful, and that's what makes him so interesting. He's a fantastic stick handler. He's got an elite shot as well. I'd say it kind of rivals Carson Rehkopf's. Rehkopf's has a bit more power, a bit more velocity on it, but Firkus is so good at picking corners in motion. That combines really well with his skating ability. He's often either using crossovers to the left or to the right in order to open up a shooting lane, and then he can shoot inside of those crossovers really well. Really, really smart as well, but obviously at 5'10", 153 pounds, he's slight physically, and he doesn't have the mechanics to overcome it. So he really, really needs the off-puck movement, the off-puck reads in order to create offensively for himself, and he's definitely capable of doing it. We've seen a lot of sequences from Firkus this past year where he'd play off Matt Savoy, why am I blanking on his name? Braden Yeager, there we go. He'd play off of those two guys and just find really small pockets of space where he can just get a shot off really quickly. Very interesting player in that regard. But again, the physicality needs to come a couple steps before he progresses, right?
Yes, and he'll be off to the AHL this season, which will be a pretty good place for him to work on those aspects of his game. And I also think that one thing that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on is when he adds some pounds, because he won't be playing NHL minutes when he's listed at 153 pounds. He's probably going to be up to like 170, 175 at that point, with a couple years of AHL development. I think his shot's going to be able to also like boost itself by another like full grade point as well, because the only thing it lacks is that like raw power that you do see from players like Carson Rehkopf. And again, when you pair that shooting ability with almost as good playmaking ability, I really think he's an underrated playmaker because the shot is just, it shines so brightly every single game. And the puck handling too is a true triple threat in the offensive zone, which allowed him to score 61 goals and 126 points, which is exactly 2 points a game in 63 games last season. He's a player that I've been super excited for. Going back to his draft year, I had him ranked, I believe, 13th overall in that draft year, and I probably wouldn't change that particularly much with hindsight. So I think it's a pretty clear top three in terms of the elite level talent here with Seattle. But the fourth guy is also another favorite of ours in Oscar Fisker Mølgaard, the 6', 166-pound centerman who is a fantastic skater, an elite level defensive forward, and has also been able to really explore his playmaking game offensively. He scored 9 goals and 21 points in 50 SHL games with HV 71 last season. He was one of the more consistent players as well, and he's a player that is just, he's all pace, and I think he's going to be a pretty easy NHL projection. Give him another year or two, add some pounds as well. I mean, 166 is also still quite light in terms of a forward, but I still think that there's so much in his game that he's going to be at least a bottom 6 checking forward, but there's definitely ample room for runway into a middle 6 role and potentially even a second line role long term. There's a lot to like with this player.
Absolutely. And then we have David Goyette, who's been looking really interesting as well. Very, very smart player. Uses his processing really well to get up the ice, to create plays that way. It's got some interesting tools on that side. And he's a really good passer as well. You know, he's mainly a playmaker, and he also led the OHL in scoring, by the way, 117 points in 68 games. The Kraken are really good at picking up prospects who pop off offensively after their draft years. And that's definitely the case for David Goyette. Kind of an average skater with below average physical tools at 5'10", 175 pounds. There's definitely an uphill climb in his game, but he's still a decently skilled, very, very smart prospect who can think the game at an advanced level, and that should work out for him. We've seen it work out for Matt Poitras, for example, with Boston Bruins. He's kind of in that same mold of has some untranslatable tools, but really, really intelligent processing and really quick reads and decisions. So has a decent kind of amount of skills to work with there. And working with Quentin Musty this past year with Sudbury has been very, very, very money for his career, right?
Absolutely, it has. I think that that pairing was, and you add in another player in Dalibor Dvorsky. Those three players are just going to town with Sudbury, and definitely had some of the brightest flashes that we saw from any OHL team all
Yep.
season long. But I think that wraps up the top five for Seattle. But there's so much depth in this pool as well that I think deserves a mention. Julius Mietinen's a really good physical centerman who's a fantastic net front presence plus level defensive impact. Ryan Winterton's another interesting prospect who played a really good AHL debut season last year. Caden Price and Lucas Dragicevic are two players that have some really good tools and really good offensive instincts, but the overall game still has a ways to go before they're going to be NHL caliber. But the runway is still there, so we're going to see how they continue developing. And one other player that I definitely wanted to mention here, who's relatively interesting in his development, is Edward Schala. Player who's definitely struggled since being drafted, and even in his draft year had some really big red flags that I know scared the pair of us a lot out of ranking him inside the top at least 35 for me. I think I had him like between 35 and 40 somewhere, and yeah, he has not developed particularly well since then. Not the best thinker of the game in the offensive zone. Some flashes of tools. As a D-1, was a fantastic playmaker internationally for Czechia, but
Yeah.
we haven't seen any flashes that have been nearly as bright in like the 3 seasons since then. So ample room for question marks there, but who knows? Maybe he defies the odds and is able to make his way back into the conversation to be a middle six piece for Seattle. But right now the odds are stacked against him.
For sure, and that's missing a plethora of other guys, Yanni Newman, Clark Caswell, a bunch of other ones, but we'll have to wrap things up here for this first segment for Seattle. We'll move on to Calgary in just a sec, but just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Hey NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats and the live play-by-play on the exact same page where you place your bets. Whether you want to take those swings on the NFL, or maybe you prefer European football. The Champions League is now 1 match day old. All the big leagues are really ramping up at this point. Or maybe you're not at all a soccer fan. Maybe you prefer tennis or golf or whatever sport is tickles your fancy. The choice is yours with FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com to take your big swings on your favorite sporting events and teams.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our second segment here with the Calgary Flames at number 10. We finally get into the top 10 prospect pools in the NHL, and Calgary make it by a hair. There was definitely a conversation there between Seattle and Calgary, but upside prevailed. Let's start off with Zayne Parekh at number 1. In my opinion, one of the maybe top 2, top 3 highest upside under 21 defensemen outside the NHL right now. High end potential in his game. Fantastic skater, fantastic handler. The skating's a bit upright. His stance is a bit weird, but he compensates for that with really good crossover usage, really fluid edge work. And overall, he's just a fantastic thinker of the game offensively. He's a prospect who, you give him the puck, things happen. That's what happened in this draft year with Saginaw. Put up a massive point totals. It was 90 plus points in 60 games. 96 points in 63 games, I want to say. Am I on the nose on that?
66, but 33 66? Goals.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. 33 goal season from a defenseman. The only one who did that as well this past year was Carter Yakimchuk, who's a different kind of, for me, he's in a different tier, Zayne Parekh. He's just the thinking of the game, the processing, the skating, the awareness. He can be nasty at times, and I think his defensive game really went over criticized this past year. It honestly wasn't that bad in my viewings. I really appreciated his ability to shepherd opponents to the boards, to play some physical hockey down low when he needed to. He definitely had some moments where he misread the game, but more often than not, he was ahead of the play. He was thinking well. It's just that, he had his couple of gaffes in this draft year, and that kind of tanked the stock a bit and led him to be drafted at 9th overall in 2024. For me, it was a top 5 prospect. I thought it was a top 5 lock in the 2025 NHL draft. Elite passer, elite thinker, elite handler, elite shooter, great skater. There's just so much love in his game. I think he has the potential to be a number 1 defenseman in the NHL, and I'm not backing down from that stance. Let's just move right on to number 2 here with Dustin Wolf, a high-end goaltender as well, who's been developing really well for the Calgary Flames. At this point, he's played 17 games in the NHL, put up an .893 save percentage this past year. but also played 36 games in the AHL and put up a 922. So he's definitely got the tools to play pro hockey, despite the fact that he's 6 foot, 160 pounds ish. He's pretty slight, but man, can he move in that crease, right?
Absolutely. He's a true athlete in the crease. And he also is one of the best puck trackers that I've scouted among goaltenders in the past, 5 years. He seems to never lose track of the puck at any point. And when he does get beat, it often is because he is just a little bit small. He doesn't get quite as many lucky bounces as perhaps your 6'8" goaltenders would, where if you lose track of the puck or there's 3 different layers of screens, Dustin Wolf is at a little bit of a disadvantage in those situations. But still, I don't think that I could name you a better prospect selected in the 7th round apart from Devin Levy, maybe in the past 5 to 10 years. Like those two undersized goaltenders were really the 2 massive home run swings, and Dustin Wolf is probably just one tier below your elite level Jesper Wallstedt and Askarov goaltenders among prospect goaltenders still at this point. So a lot to love with him, and it really was a slight competition with Zayne Parekh for that number 1 spot, because Dustin Wolf is a fantastic prospect, and the number 3 player in our list here doesn't have the same level of elite level upside, but he's a player that both of us have a lot of appreciation for, and Andrew Basha, just a tremendous skater, never stops working, and his development curve is one that I just have loved to see, because he went from being one of the more effective checking forwards in the entire WHL as a D-1 to being a real offensive dynamo with his pace, his speed, his passing ability, his puck handling, his vision, being able to find small gaps in coverage and using his own speed to draw defenders in towards him before making plays through or around them.
Yeah.
And really just a lot to like in this game.
Absolutely. His tools are just above average across the board. Great shooter, great thinker, great passer, great handler, great skater. On top of having an elite motor, great sense for the game. He's reliable. He's got leadership. He's got so much to love. I was astounded to see him slip to 41st in the draft. I'll be curious to look into why that was, but for my indication, this is an NHL. He's got everything he needs. We move on to Samuel Honzek at number 4 in the Calgary Flames prospect pool. A high-end shooting center / winger. He's 6'3", 195 pounds. He's got some great physical tools. He's a great puck protector. Put through a decent season this past year, 31 points in 33 games with the Vancouver Giants, but wasn't as well surrounded as he could have been, which kind of impacted his point totals. Played 2 AHL games, was great at the World Juniors. Just a reliable, smart shooter with decent puck skills, decent physicality. I like his game overall. And then we move on to number 5 with Hunter Brzustewicz, who they acquired from the Vancouver Canucks, and I want to say the Elias Lindholm trade.
It was indeed.
Exactly. He's a playmaking defenseman, puck-moving playmaking defenseman at his core, 6 foot, 190 pounds. He's 19 years old still. Put together 92 points in 67 games with the Kitchener Rangers. Was their key power play quarterback the entire season. Was playing 25 plus minutes a night, most of them in the offensive zone. It's a great dynamo with the puck. I think the main thing with him is he's a bit too poised. Sometimes I want to see urgency, aggression from him. He's a very calm defenseman, very kind of let the puck come to me type of player. He's not going to chase the puck a lot defensively, but once you get him the puck offensively, he'll find the right pass. He'll time it extremely well. He'll put the right weight on that pass to get it to a teammate in the right area to score. So I love his game as well. And then we have a bunch of honorable mentions. There's a long list of them, which is why Calgary is this high in the rankings. Luc Misa, Jérémy Poirier, Etienne Morin, Adar Stuniev, Henry Muse, Jacob Battaglia, Matvei Michkov, who they just added in the first round, William Stromgren. There's a long list of players there. And they'll be keeping a close eye on Matvei Michkov this season. He's headed to Shawinigan in the QMJHL after failing to meet the criteria for GPA in the NCAA. Initially, his rights belonged to Val d'Or, which was the worst team in the Q last year. He got traded quickly to Shawinigan and will be playing there this season. So I'll be keeping a close eye on his development and see how he progresses. But yeah, a great group of either very smart, very fast, very skilled, very responsible, or very physical players throughout these honorable mentions. They all have their different tools. Quick shout out to Adar Stuniev, who's probably the worst skater I've ever seen potentially be an NHLer.
I love him. I love
I
that
know you
player
do.
so much.
I know I just have so much trouble with his skating, but I'm still hoping
He's
it turns
so
out well.
intelligent. He constantly somehow wins his puck races just because he takes the quickest routes and he anticipates play faster than his NCAA competition. He also has a wicked shot. He's a very fun player when you look past the skating. If you can only look at the skating, he's a very frustrating player. So it depends on your perspective.
For sure. I mean, we'll see how he develops. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third and final segment where we look at Philadelphia at number 9. We'll get into that in just a second. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at Indeed. We're driven by the search for better here at Locked On, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match instead with Indeed. Indeed is the hiring and matching platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates incredibly quickly. You can dish a busy work and use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging all in one place so you can connect with candidates faster. And it doesn't just help you connect with candidates faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed develops the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I loved about Indeed, as someone who got his day job through Indeed, is that it's incredibly straightforward. Everything's there, very clear. There are no surprises. You know exactly what the company's looking for in terms of criteria. You know exactly what their qualifications are, and you know exactly what the salary range is. So you're not heading into anything with any surprises. You know exactly what you're looking for, and you can compare that with your skill set to make the best decision for your career. So Indeed is offering listeners of the show a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. So just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you've heard about Indeed on this podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply, but if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our final segment. We'll close things off here with Philadelphia at 9th overall in our prospect pool rankings. The Flyers end up here at 9th, mainly due to, I mean, Matvei Michkov, right? I mean, there's no getting around the fact that this is one of the best prospects in the NHL, right?
Absolutely. And I think by a decent margin, the best prospect that we've covered so far in this series, Zayne Parekh might be the only contender for that, but I definitely give the edge to Michkov in that head-to-head. And
So do I.
Philadelphia's pool probably should have ended up higher than 9th if there had been a bit more depth, but the depth that the other teams that we did place slightly ahead of them was significantly stronger, even if Matvei Michkov is the best prospect among the next probably 3 or 4 teams that we're going to be covering beyond just Philadelphia here. But as you mentioned, just a tremendously skilled player. The shooting ability is bar none elite. He's one of the smartest players yet to play a single NHL game. The passing ability, the puck handling are routinely underestimated because the shooting shines so brightly and are both elite in their own rights. And while his physicality and skating ability aren't quite at the same level, they just don't have to be. And I think that he's going to be a perennial 40-plus goal scorer in the NHL while making a really big difference, but just reading the play ahead of even his NHL competition. I think that projection is relatively safe at this stage, even though he hasn't played a single game just yet in the big leagues. And I'm very curious to see what his rookie season ends up looking like this year, especially with a coach like John Tortorella. Is going to be fascinating to keep track of, but he's a guy that I think Philadelphia fans are going to have a bunch of fun watching for the next decade plus.
Absolutely. I mean, just for me, he's so good 6 feet around the net, and he's so good at getting lost and popping up in those areas unmarked. It's uncanny how many times he's done that in the KHL, how many times he's done that in the preseason so far in training camp for the Flyers. Just so reliable. You know he's inevitably going to end up in the slot with the puck unmarked. He does it like no one else. I'd be very surprised if he's not an elite NHLer when all is said and done. But let's move right on to number 2 here with Jett Luchanko, who they just picked up at 13th overall in the 2024 NHL draft. And Luchanko is a player we covered already with his own prospect breakdown series, his prospect spotlight, which we did on the episode as well. You can check that out. But to sum him up, incredibly intelligent, incredibly athletic, a great skater, a dynamic handler as well, who's able to move up the ice. And that's really what kind of surprised me. At the start of the year, I saw Luchanko as your meat and potatoes, two-way center who doesn't really do much well offensively. But as the season went on and he started taking more and more importance with the Guelph Storm, you saw the passing, you saw the handling really stand out. But above all, decision-making, positioning, awareness, two-way play, defensive ability, all those tools are incredibly polished with Luchanko, right?
Physicality as well. Like
Oh,
he's a
100%.
really, really well-rounded player, as you mentioned, and also one of the youngest drafted in the first round this past year. He only turned 18 well into the summer, and he's a player that I think Philadelphia Flyers fans are really going to appreciate with how he approaches the game of hockey. Even if his upside isn't quite as high as other players that were drafted around that range of the draft, I still think that he's going to be one of the fan favorites when he really entrenches himself into the lineup. And while I doubt he cracks the lineup this year, I would not at all be shocked if he did so in a year's time, because he is just so polished.
For sure. And our lead scout, David St. Louis, keeps insisting that he's going to be playing in the NHL this year. I'm not there yet, but we'll see.
It's not impossible.
It is possible. We've seen players of this play style do it before. But regardless, we'll move on to number 3, and it's Oliver Bonk at number 3 here for the Philadelphia Flyers. A 6'2", 290-pound right shot defenseman who played for the London Knights this past year and is likely returning for his final year this next year. Big, physical, mobile. He's got really good defensive skill. He's an above-average passer, but I don't see the hockey sense as a high-end thing at all, and that's the main thing that kind of limits him. But he's one of these kind of less intelligent but really toolsy defensive defensemen that London seems really good at developing. I've seen it with Sam Dickinson. Before that, Mayu on the more offensive defenseman side. These guys tend to turn out, and we'll see how it works out with Bonk. I'm just not really particularly sold on the skills or the hockey sense being anything kind of high end. That's why he's at number 3 and not at number 2. After that, we have Denver Barkey, one of our personal favorites. Another London Knight here, who's basically a buzzsaw, right? I mean, just high-end motor, high-end intensity, but also some decent skill, right?
Definitely. He's a really intelligent player, and I think that his brain keeps up with his pace most of the time as well, which is a real compliment to his brain because the pace is incessant. And beyond that, as you mentioned, the skill is also nothing to scoff at. He's a really good playmaker. The passing ability shone really brightly for London last season. He brings a lot of the same elements to the game that Easton Cowan does, and he doesn't quite get the same amount of respect as Cowan does. So I have a lot of appreciation for Barkey. He is smaller than Cowan, certainly, at 5'9" and 155 pounds. He's definitely diminutive as a forward, but give him a couple more years to develop the physical side of his game. And he has some decent leverage mechanics in the boards. Like he wins a lot more battles than you would expect a player of his frame to do. And I think a lot of that also comes down with how he processes the game. He is just really good at anticipating play ahead of other players. And I definitely see an NHL future for him. Whether that ends up being as a third liner or maybe even second liner, we'll see. But there's definitely enough skill, intelligence, and mainly just pace in his game, I think, to facilitate that projection at the end of the day. But the last player we wanted to give a shout out to here is I've actually already gotten into a couple NHL games at the tail end of last season. And that's Emil Andrae, who got into 4 games for Philadelphia following a pretty solid debut season in the AHL with Lehigh Valley, scoring 32 points in 61 games. He's a pretty decent offensive leading defenseman with solid puck handling ability, really good passer, a really solid shot as well. And while he is also undersized, there's a bit of a theme here to wrap up the top 5 for us in Philadelphia at 5'9" and 181 pounds as a defenseman. I definitely think he has enough of those offensive tools to become an offensive specialist, whether that be as a number 4 or number 5 long term. On which pairing he ends up playing remains to be seen, but there's definitely a lot to like with him. He works hard despite not being the most physical of players, and I think that there's enough in his defensive toolkit to allow him to tread water in his own zone. But I think being paired with a guy that maybe like Oliver Bonk, for instance, even could be quite solid for his overall projection. But talk me through some of the honorable mentions here, because the depth isn't quite as strong as what we've seen in other ones that we've already covered today and that we will continue to cover in the following episodes. There's still a couple players that we want to give shout outs to here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a long list of players who have interesting sets of tools, either 1 or 2 things that they do well above average that make them interesting projects, but I wouldn't say they have many guaranteed NHLers like other prospect pools do. We can start off with Carter Sotheran, who's a kind of mobile, rangy 6'3" right-handed defenseman who's been playing in the dub recently and has played really well. Alex Bump, who's been playing a straight in the NCAA and has made the jump from the USHL to the NCAA seem really, really easy. He put up 36 points in 38 games, including 14 goals. Mainly a goal scorer, mainly a shooter, but also has some decent hands as well. Devin Kaplan's your kind of north-south physical center who can move the puck both ways fairly well, who can kind of suppress plays defensively, make plays offensively, but it's kind of a jack of all trades type of prospect. Noel Powell's interesting as well as a high-end playmaker with kind of really, really rough foot speed and edge work, but he's still able to create plays in transition due to his hockey sense and passing. Hopefully he makes the jump to the NCAA soon. Heikki Rohonen, Alex Chernik, Carson Bjarnason in goal, Yevgor Zavragin as well, and Alexis Gendron here at the back end of this prospect pool. So a decent amount of players who have a couple of things that they do really well or are overall well-rounded, but other than, I'd say, Kaplan, Spencer Gill, maybe, those are the only two I'd say are guaranteed NHLers. Outside of that, it's really project picks and hopes in that sense. But that wraps up our episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to continue watching our show as we continue to break down our prospect pool rankings and work our way up to first overall. It's been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian High. We hope you tune in next time.